The sun was setting behind the cracked skyline of the city, casting long shadows over the deserted streets where few dared to roam after dark. On the edge of town, near the old warehouse district, a group of rough-looking men rode their motorcycles with a loud roar, their leather jackets creaking in the evening air. These weren't ordinary bikers, they were a gang with a reputation for intimidation, chaos, and pushing people around to get what they wanted. Their leader, a burly man with a jagged scar across his cheek, barked orders as they slowed near a narrow alley. He had heard about a certain old man who lived alone in the neighborhood, a black man with a mysterious past who no one dared to cross. But that night, fueled by bravado and cheap whiskey, the gang thought they could make an example out of him. They pulled up to the man's modest porch, engines idling. The old man, sitting quietly in a worn rocking chair, looked up without surprise. His eyes were sharp, tired but burning with a hidden fire. The gang laughed, mocking him, underestimating the weight of years carried quietly in that frail body. "Hey, old man," the leader called out, voice rough like gravel, "you better watch who's walking these streets. This is our turf." The old man's gaze didn't waver. "I've walked these streets longer than any of you've been alive," he said softly, voice low but steady. "You're pushing the wrong man." The gang scoffed. One of them stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "We're just having a little fun. No harm done." Suddenly, the old man's tone changed. He stood slowly, leaning on a cane that seemed fragile but was heavy with unseen strength. "Listen carefully, because this is the only warning you'll get." He began to speak, not just words, but a story filled with pain, survival, and a strength carved out of a lifetime of battles. He told them about a past they could barely imagine. Years spent fighting for dignity in a world that tried to break him, battles not with fists but with unyielding spirit. The gang grew silent, the bravado draining from their faces. There was something in his voice, a weight that stopped them cold. His warning wasn't just about him, it was about history, respect, and a power that didn't need weapons. One by one, the bikers lowered their heads, understanding they had crossed a line. Without another word, they mounted their bikes and left, the roar of their engines fading into the night. The old man returned to his chair, the city settling into silence once again. But in the shadows, something had shifted, a lesson learned, respect earned, and a reminder that sometimes, strength lies not in muscle, but in the courage to stand tall when pushed the past revealed. As the rumble of the bikes faded into the distance, the old man settled back into his creaking chair, his hands resting gently on the worn cane. The fading light caught the lines on his face, every wrinkle a story, every scar a memory. For a moment, the street was silent except for the distant hum of the city and the soft rustle of the evening breeze through the cracked windows of abandoned buildings. He looked up at the sky, now painted with streaks of orange and purple, and a quiet smile touched his lips. Not many remembered those days, but he did, those days when the world around him was harsher than the cracked pavement beneath his feet. The neighborhood that raised him. He was born in this very neighborhood over 70 years ago, when the streets were alive with the sounds of children playing and jazz music drifting from open windows. Back then, the city was different. It was a place where communities banded together to survive, a place where respect was earned through courage and kindness, not threats or violence. But times changed. Factories closed, jobs disappeared, and the old neighborhoods that once thrived fell into decay. The people who stayed were often forgotten by those who moved on or looked away. And sometimes, that neglect gave rise to fear, fear that bred violence and desperation. Through it all, the old man had stayed. He watched friends come and go, saw families broken by hardship, but he never lost his grip on hope or his sense of justice. A life of quiet strength. His strength was never about fighting with fists. It was about endurance, rising every time life knocked him down, standing tall in the face of injustice, and never allowing bitterness to darken his soul. When the biker gang showed up tonight, they saw only a frail old man. They didn't see the battles he had fought silently. They didn't know about the nights he stayed awake protecting children from the dangers lurking in the streets. They didn't understand the sacrifices he made to keep the peace, to teach respect, and to carry the memory of those who had paved the way before him. He remembered one night decades ago when a gang like this had tried to take over the neighborhood. Instead of violence, he had gathered the community. They stood side by side, strong in their unity, and told the intruders that this was their home, not a playground for chaos. That night, the message was clear: respect was not given lightly, and it was never to be taken for granted. The warning that stopped them cold. As the bikers listened tonight, something stirred inside them, a respect they didn't expect. His voice, though soft, carried an unshakable authority. Every word was a reminder of a history they had ignored, a culture they had disrespected. You may have the numbers. You may have the noise. But there is a power here you don't see, he said, gripping his cane firmly. I carry the stories of those who came before me. Stories of struggle, pain, and triumph. Those stories are my armor. The leader of the gang felt a chill he couldn't explain. His bravado faltered as he looked into the old man's eyes, eyes that had seen the worst and yet still burned with fierce pride. Without another word, the gang turned away. Tonight, they had learned something invaluable, that some battles don't need to be fought with violence. Some warnings are enough to change the course of actions. The shadows of history. As the biker gang's engines faded into the distance, the old man remained seated on his porch, the weight of years pressing down on him as heavily as the warm evening air. Around him, the neighborhood seemed to breathe. Old brick buildings, cracked sidewalks, and rusting street lamps whispered memories of a time long past. His mind wandered back to those early days. The city was a different place then, a melting pot of dreams and despair. His parents had come from distant lands, seeking a better life amid the chaos of post-war America. They worked hard, sacrificing everything so their children could have opportunities they never had. The old man had been a child of the streets, barefoot in summer, learning lessons not from books but from life itself. He knew the meaning of respect because he earned it the hard way. Every day was a test of courage, a fight for dignity amid poverty and prejudice. The brotherhood of the streets. Back then, there was a code, an unspoken bond among those who struggled together. Neighborhoods were tight-knit communities where everyone knew each other's names and stories. The elders taught the young ones the value of honor, honesty, and loyalty. The old man recalled the names of friends long gone: Marcus, who had dreams of becoming a lawyer but lost his life to gang violence; Clara, whose laughter had lit up the darkest alleys; and old Mr. Jenkins, who kept a watchful eye on the block and never let trouble roam unchecked. They had formed what they called the Brotherhood of the Streets, a pact to protect each other, to stand firm against threats from outside forces. It was a fragile peace built on mutual respect and shared history. The turning point. But as the city grew, so did the challenges. The factories closed one by one, jobs vanished, and desperation took root. New gangs emerged, not bound by the old codes or community ties. They came with noise, with reckless disregard for the people who called the streets home. The old man remembered the night it all changed. The night the brotherhood was tested to its limits. The gang that had once threatened their neighborhood returned, armed with motorcycles and weapons, ready to claim what wasn't theirs. Instead of meeting them with anger, the old man had rallied the community. Families, young and old, gathered with makeshift signs and candles. They stood together on the streets, a wall of humanity that spoke louder than any weapon. That night, the gang saw something they hadn't expected: a neighborhood united. And they retreated. The present-day challenge. Tonight's encounter was a reminder of those days. The biker gang had come in loud and violent, expecting to intimidate. Instead, they found an old man who was the embodiment of history, courage, and unyielding spirit. The gang leader, once full of swagger, now understood the deeper truths beneath the surface. The old man's chilling warning wasn't just about respect, it was about legacy, about the stories that shape a community's soul. Reflection and hope. As darkness fell, the old man rose slowly, leaning on his cane. He walked inside, where photographs and mementos lined the walls, echoes of a life lived with purpose. Though the world around him had changed, his mission remained the same. To protect the dignity of his neighborhood and to pass on the lessons of courage and respect to the next generation. Because in the end, it was not the roar of engines or the flash of weapons that defined a community, it was the strength of its heart, inside the minds, the biker gang's perspective. The rumble of engines echoed off the city walls as the biker gang pulled into a nearby diner, the neon lights flickering like the pulse of the restless night. The leader, a tall man named Ryder, slammed his fist on the table, frustration etched deep in his furrowed brow. "Did you see that old man back there?" Ryder snarled, eyes burning with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Thought we could roll through like kings of the street, and he just stared us down like we were nothing." One of the younger riders, a wiry man called Jax, nodded solemnly. "Yeah, boss." There was something in his eyes. Like he wasn't afraid of us at all. I felt weird. Like we'd crossed a line we shouldn't have. The group fell silent, the weight of the moment settling over them like a heavy fog. Ryder tapped his cigarette against the ashtray, sparks falling but never quite lighting. The past that haunts Ryder. Ryder wasn't always the hardened biker gang leader he appeared to be. Beneath the tough exterior lay a complicated past, filled with loss, regret, and the desperate search for belonging. He grew up in a broken home, with a father who left when he was just a boy and a mother who worked multiple jobs to keep food on the table. The streets had been both his playground and his prison. Joining the biker gang gave him a sense of family he'd never known, a brotherhood forged in rebellion and adrenaline. But deep down, Ryder carried scars. The loss of his younger brother to gang violence haunted him. Every reckless ride, every battle with rival gangs was a way to numb the pain. Questioning the path. Tonight's encounter with the old man stirred something inside Ryder, a flicker of doubt. Was this endless cycle of violence and intimidation really what he wanted? Or was there another way to find respect, to find peace? Jack spoke up again, voice quieter this time. "Boss, maybe that old man wasn't just some tough guy. Maybe he was trying to tell us something. Maybe respect isn't about fear or power." Ryder stared into his coffee cup, swirling the dark liquid as if searching for answers at the bottom. "Maybe you're right," he finally said, voice low and thoughtful. "Maybe it's time we rethink who we are, and who we want to be." Part 5, The Neighborhood Speaks. Meanwhile, word of the confrontation spread quickly through the neighborhood. At the local community center, a group gathered, elders, parents, teenagers, all sharing their thoughts and fears. Mrs. Davis, a respected community leader in her 70s, raised her voice. "We can't let this violence define us. We have to come together, to remind these young ones who we are and where we come from." A young woman named Tamika, barely out of high school, nodded eagerly. "Yeah, it's like we've forgotten what it means to stand up for each other without fighting. We need to rebuild that trust." The conversation grew into plans, meetings, neighborhood watches, youth programs. The spirit of the Brotherhood of the Streets was rekindling, not as a gang or clique, but as a true community. Part 6, Bridging the Divide. In the days that followed, the old man reached out quietly to the local youth, sharing stories and wisdom. Ryder and his gang found themselves invited to the community center, hesitant at first but curious. Slowly, conversations began. Walls came down. The bikers learned about the neighborhood's history, its struggles and triumphs. The community saw the bikers not just as troublemakers, but as young people searching for identity and purpose. Part 7, A New Dawn. The transformation was neither swift nor easy. There were setbacks, misunderstandings, moments of tension. But over time, a fragile peace took root, built on mutual respect, empathy, and a shared vision for the future. Ryder stood alongside the old man at a community event months later, the roar of motorcycles replaced by laughter and music. The old man smiled, seeing the legacy of courage and dignity he had fought to protect alive in a new generation. The streets were still rough, but the heart of the neighborhood beat stronger than ever. Ryder's reckoning. In the quiet moments after the community gathering, Ryder found himself alone on his motorcycle, the night air cool against his skin. His mind replayed the old man's words over and over, resonating more deeply with each passing day. He pulled out a worn photograph from his jacket, his younger brother's smiling face frozen in time. Ryder's grip tightened. "I can't keep running this way," he muttered. "I owe it to you, to change." The gang noticed the shift in Ryder's demeanor. His usual fiery outbursts gave way to thoughtful silences. Some embraced the change, inspired by his new vision. Others resisted, fearing loss of control or respect. Part 9, The Challenges Within. One evening, tensions boiled over. A rival gang, sensing weakness, tried to provoke Ryder's group. Old instincts flared, fists clenched, engines revved. But Ryder stepped forward, raising his hands to stop the chaos. "We don't have to do this," he said firmly, eyes blazing with new resolve. "There's another way." It was a fragile peace, but a crucial one. The gang began to patrol the streets not as aggressors, but protectors, standing up against violence and injustice, earning cautious respect from the community. Part 10, The Old Man's Legacy. The old man, whose name was Samuel, shared stories of his own youth, fighting for civil rights, standing against systemic oppression. He taught the young people that strength came from unity and courage, not intimidation. Samuel's life became a bridge between generations, a living history lesson and a beacon of hope. Part 11, Healing the Neighborhood. With the bikers working alongside community leaders, crime rates began to drop. Local schools saw improved attendance. Murals celebrating the neighborhood's resilience went up on walls once marred by graffiti. Tamika started a youth mentorship program, inspired by the change she witnessed. Parents joined forces to create safe spaces where young people could express themselves without fear. Part 12, The Ripple Effect. News of the transformation spread beyond the neighborhood. Other communities, facing similar struggles, reached out for guidance. Ryder and Samuel spoke at events, sharing their journey from conflict to cooperation. The story of that one night, when a biker gang pushed the wrong old man, became a powerful symbol that change is possible when we choose understanding over violence. Samuel's past revealed. One evening, Samuel invited Ryder and a few gang members to his modest home, walls adorned with photographs from decades past, marches, protests, family gatherings. His voice softened as he recounted his youth. "I grew up in a world that tried to silence us. When I was your age, we stood in the streets demanding change, risking everything," Samuel said. But it wasn't about fighting with fists. It was about fighting with hearts and minds. He told them stories of leaders who inspired him, the sacrifices made, and the power of peaceful resistance. The room was silent, every man and woman hanging on his every word, feeling the weight of history pressing into the present. Part 14, A New Purpose. Inspired by Samuel's wisdom, Ryder proposed a new direction for the gang. No longer just a group bound by rebellion, they would become a force for positive change, community defenders, mentors to troubled youth, advocates for peace. Some members hesitated, uncomfortable with shedding their old identities. But Ryder was relentless, meeting with each person, listening to their fears and hopes. "We can't erase the past," Ryder said, "but we can build a future that's better for all of us." Part 15, The Turning Point. The true test came when a heated confrontation erupted with a rival gang over disputed territory. This time, Ryder refused to escalate. Instead, he arranged a meeting, raw, tense, filled with years of grudges. Words replaced weapons. The rival leader, seeing Ryder's commitment, agreed to a truce. It was a fragile peace, but a start. Part 16, Healing Wounds. Back in the neighborhood, the bikers worked tirelessly, cleaning graffiti, organizing food drives, rebuilding broken fences. They partnered with local businesses to create job opportunities for young people at risk. The community began to heal, trust blossoming where suspicion once reigned. Part 17, The Legacy Lives On. Years passed. Ryder's gang became a recognized force for good. Samuel's health declined, but his spirit remained unbroken. On his final days, surrounded by friends and neighbors, Samuel smiled. "You gave this neighborhood a gift, hope. Remember, strength is not about power, but about love." Epilogue, A Changed World. Ryder stood before a crowd gathered for the opening of a new community center named in Samuel's honor. Children laughed, music played, and the sun set over a neighborhood transformed. From the moment a biker gang pushed the wrong old man, a chain reaction started, one that changed lives, healed wounds, and built a legacy of peace.